And now it's streaming live. And it's playing, right?
Yes.
So you don't, unless you really want to see the people,
Yeah, I
you don't
don't.
have to.
So how do I get rid of that?
I think you can move that whole, I think it's the, there it is.
I was trying to get it off of my screen so
Yeah.
I could see my volume.
You can, yeah, click that and it'll minimize it.
Okay,
It's small.
that's what, okay.
Oh, good. Good to see you, man.
Good morning. Welcome to the Holston Valley Unitarian Universalist Church. I am the Reverend Tiffany Sapp, and I am so glad that we can connect this time through the power of technology. We are a month into this Zoom transition, and I thank you for your patience as we are learning how to do it. Hopefully, we get a little better at it every week. I, for one, really love seeing your faces here, and I'm grateful for the connection that this platform has allowed. Please be aware that these services are being live streamed and recorded, and that you can find subtitles in one of the menu options at the bottom of your screen. We are still posting the services to YouTube, and you are welcome to join us that way, but you will miss being able to participate in our interactive joys and concerns. Today, I want to share with you an amazing story that I encountered in my first months here as your minister. I came across some fascinating history that connects to a large piece of land just a few acres away from where our church sits. All land contains a story. The practice of land acknowledgement, which is getting picked up by many UU churches, tells the story of the Cherokee that once hunted here. Today's story acknowledges a slightly later time in our land's history, but it's equally important to our work of building a world community with peace, justice, and liberty for all. It's about a piece of land that you can see from the back corner of our property, and it's set in the 1840s. It's a story about Peg, Rhoda, Edward, Larkin, and John Ford, 5 slaves who fought a legal battle for their freedom in the Tennessee Supreme Court and won 2 decades before the Civil War and the Emancipation Proclamation. Today we tell their story. Our Unitarian Universalist principles ground us in the inherent worth and dignity of every person and in our commitment to the democratic process that tries to give everybody a voice. Our Unitarian Universalist sources tell us to draw from the words and deeds of prophetic people, which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. The story of Peg, Rhoda, Edward, Larkin, and John does exactly that. They are our prophetic people. Let's sit at their feet and see what we can learn from them today.
I am Rosemary, and I'm happy to be with you today as your service leader. Even though we aren't in person, we are together. We are part of a community that is bigger than the limits of geography. Our services are currently 100% online. According to our reopening task force recommendations, we will stay online only until both the Johnson City Metro and Kingsport Metro areas reach the medium risk category for 30 days. Once we make this move from red to yellow, we will begin our partial reopen. The good news is that our area is making progress. We're starting to feel hopeful that we're headed in the right direction. You can check covidactnow.org, covidactnow.org, and put in our area to watch our region's progress. In the meantime, we can take advantage of small group, off-site, outdoor, and other safely creative opportunities for fellowship. There are many ways to be together until we can all come together. The lighting of the chalice has become a tradition in many Unitarian Universalist congregations, ours included. Ever since World War II, it has been a symbol of our commitment to justice and fighting for people who are marginalized and at risk. If you have a candle or chalice to light at home, please join me in lighting the chalice. Let us wake up, not from the Sunday morning exhaustion, from the wish for a few more drowsy minutes in bed. Let us wake up to this world we live in, to its beauty and wonder, and also its tragedy and pain. We must wake up to this reality that not all in our world have what we do, however much or little that is. We must wake up to the idea that our wholeness, our lives, are only as complete as the lives of those around us, of those we are inextricably tied to in a great web of mutuality, of which we are all a part. We must stay woke, in the words of our friends and colleagues involved in Black Lives Matter, working every day for racial justice in our country. Let us wake up. Let us stay awake. Let us stay woke.
Today's story, song, and sermonette all flow into each other as we encounter the brave struggle of Peg, Rhoda, Edward, Larkin, and John Ford. So we're going to do things in a little bit of a different order today. So we're moving right into our candles of community. Since we've moved to Zoom, this has become one of my favorite parts of the service because I want to know what is going on in your lives. Whether it's joyful or concerning, whether it's monumental or mundane, we want to hear from you. If you're with us in Zoom, type your joys and concerns in the chat box. I might end up reading some of what you type out loud, so please only share what you're comfortable with everyone knowing. If you're on YouTube, I'm not going to be able to see what you write on the YouTube chat. While you share your joys and concerns and your moments of awe in the chat, I am going to light a candle for all of those affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, which is all of us, and some of us more than others. As of this morning, 5,026,960 people have died worldwide from COVID-19. Those are just the deaths that have been reported. News from Tanzania last week tells us of a national cover-up and a denial. Only 50 COVID deaths have been reported in that country, but burials in some cemeteries are up by 1,700%. So it's safe to say that even these very large numbers, which have now passed 5 million, are low. We take this seriously. And so we light a candle for all of those affected. We bear witness, and we will not look away. And thank goodness that we're not alone in this. We can scroll through the top of our screen with those little blue arrows and see who is with us here today. When I do that and I see your faces, it gives me hope and it reminds me that we're in this together. Together, we support each other when things are hard, and together we celebrate when things go well. We celebrate that Ethan turns 11 tomorrow. We celebrate that Chloe got a good scholarship to ETSU. We celebrate time with children and grandchildren at Bays Mountain. And we have concerns too. A dear friend and priest, Father Joe, is doing his best to recover from COVID right now. We have a joy, thrilled at renewed energy in the Social Justice Committee, which met yesterday. I have a joy for the people who joined me on a hike yesterday. If I hadn't already committed to that, there's no way I would have gone out in that cold, but I'm so glad I did. And it didn't even feel cold once I was with you all. I'm also grateful for the fact that vaccines are becoming available to kids 5 and up. A joy for being in live service here for the first time. A joy for Amy getting better. A personal concern. Someone is feeling conflicted about personal pursuits. And a concern for parents of kids 4 and under. We hold them in our hearts as everyone else is celebrating vaccines. They are still waiting. We hold all of these joys, all of these concerns in our hearts, and whatever remains unspoken. We hold all these in our hearts and we center our practice in loving kindness. Our story today is the story of Peg, Rhoda, Edward, Larkin, and John. In 1842, their owner, and possibly their father, Lloyd Ford Sr., died. In his will, he not only granted Peg, Rhoda, Edward, Larkin, and John their freedom, but also the hundreds of acres of farmland that they had spent their entire lives cultivating. The will was hotly contested by Lloyd Ford Jr., the eldest white son of Lloyd Ford Sr., and the case went all the way to the Tennessee Supreme Court. In the course of my research, I discovered that Jules Carrere, a local Jonesboro woman, had written a one-act play about the story of this court case. As she and I talked about these remarkable people, she agreed to gather some actors and do a reading of the play for us. And we're about to see the results of that labor of love. It's about a 22-minute reading with 10 voices, and it makes up the bulk of today's service, because the story really does speak for itself. Before we begin, I do want to offer one content warning. Because Jules relied heavily on the actual court transcripts when crafting the story, we do hear the voice of Lloyd Ford Jr., and it is hateful. His words may hurt and shock you, and I just want you to know that it's coming. And I want you to know that in the 1840s, a white man was not shy at all about speaking in such a way in the highest court of our state. More important, though, are the words of Peg, Rhoda, Edward, Larkin, and John. The reason I keep saying their name is because their agency is important. The court transcripts do not center them. They were not even allowed to bring their own case to court, but had to rely on the assistance of a white woman to represent their interests. So Jules has used her imagination to fill in the gaps in a way that highlight their courage, strength, and love. So this is the case of Ford versus Ford.
I'll never forget that night. Lloyd Ford Jr. came pounding on the door of our home, threatening to break it down. Lloyd Jr. was drunk and angry, looking for his father's will. Somehow he had found out about the will and what was in it. The will my husband and I swore to keep safe. He held a rifle to my husband Robert and to his own ill and feeble father, who he brought out on this rainy night.
Now, Mr. Hale, get the papers.
My husband told him, I guess you're going to have to decide which one of us you're going to shoot first. Because believe me, you will get one chance. And when you aim in that direction, one of us will get you from the other.
Yeah, well, one of you will still be dead. Which one do you think it'll be?
I said, Robert, wait. We'll give him what he wants. Nobody needs to get hurt.
Finally, I'm dealing with someone who understands.
I don't understand what you're doing, but I do understand you are drunk and you have a bad temper. Here.
Good. Throw them in the fire. Burn them all.
My husband begged me not to, but I told him, I'm sorry, Robert. It's for the best, for all of us. As it crackled in the fire, Ford Sr. laughed when he saw what I'd put in the fire, at which point he begged the younger Ford to take his father home before he caught his death. They left, and my husband was so angry. He asked me, why did you give in and burn the papers? We swore an oath to him. We would keep those papers safe. But we did keep our oath. He can't read, so I burned an old essay from school, not the will. He looked right at it when I threw it in the paper in the flames. And that's why his father laughed. I only hope we're able to keep his secret. My husband said I do too, but where are the real papers? I hid them. I hid the real papers. I told Robert, I said, it's better I don't tell you. Then if you're asked at a later time, you can answer truthfully that you don't know where they are. Well, it wasn't very long after that when I did have to get them.
Order in the court.
That was the beginning. The court case of Ford versus Ford. The year was 1843. A few months before this date, I was property, counted with the acreage and head of cattle that was owned by Lloyd Ford Sr. of Jonesboro, Tennessee. I was also his property, but only until he died. After his death, I wasn't conveyed to his relatives along with his land and belongings, as was customary practice since the founding of this country. Usually I'd be passed down to an heir. Usually I would continue my work until I died, not my owner. Usually that's how it worked. This time it didn't.
It was unusual and became a landmark case regarding slaves and land ownerships when my siblings and I were granted our freedom as well as property by our former master
and father.
and possible father.
He called us his children in his will and with good friends.
A father does not own his children. He worked us the same as any other slave.
He treated us well.
He treated us better than other masters treated their slaves.
He treated us better than he treated his own children.
That is true. and we treated him better than his own children treated him. And that is exactly why we're here. The last will and testament of Lloyd Ford Sr. clearly states that the estate will go to his children.
Exactly. And I am his child.
His black children.
Order! I will have order in this court. This cross-talking will cease, or you will be escorted out, Mr. Ford.
This is outrageous.
They were outraged, all right. In no other place had something like this happened.
Some masters had set their slaves free in their wills.
This was beyond that. We were set free. We were acknowledged as his children. We were granted land and property. Slaves-only land was unheard of. Not to mention that all of this took place while there were relatives, white relatives, non-slave relatives, alive and angry and left out.
Well, not completely left out.
I apologize for my outburst, Your Honor, but how would you feel if the only thing you inherited was 1 acre of land and everything else went to those
People?
They are not people, they are slaves, property, mine by all rights.
I believe, sir, that this trial will decide that.
It was nearly unheard of for a person of color to be inside of a courthouse. By law, we, as people of color, were not allowed to bring a civil suit of our case and to defend our right to remain on this land after freedom. Nor could we file suit to keep what was our rightful inheritance. We needed to find a white person to stand in the role of next friend to file a suit for us. Finding someone to do this was not easy.
But we were fortunate. In this very town was the first newspaper dedicated to emancipation. There were people here who believed in sovereignty for all. We found someone who
will stand as the next friend for this case?
I will, Your Honor.
State your name for the court.
My name is Phoebe Stewart, Your Honor. I'll never forget that court case either. As a woman, I had few rights, but as a white woman, I had enough power to step in and make possible a case that would not have been able to otherwise. When I took the stand, I had to defend myself and my husband from claims that I was close friends with the former slaves. I had to make clear that neither my husband or I had outstanding debts or would benefit from our financial gain to receive part of the inheritance. I testified that I brought this case forward as their next friend, as is prescribed by law, for a purpose. I had the opportunity to stand for what I believe. And I believe first that Mr. Ford did have the right to leave his property to his other children. I believe they have the right to own it. I believe they have the right to their freedom, and they have the right to live freely on the land that was left them, as any other free person. I bring this case because it is the right thing to do. The lawyer for the other side objected, which was...
Overruled. She answered the question, sir. You may not object against your own witness.
The trial was heated before it even began. Our lawyer said, "Your Honor, we are here today to address 2 issues. One, mainly the ownership rights to the property left by the deceased, Lloyd Ford Sr., to his children, his natural-born black children. And secondly, their right to own and live on property within the limits of Washington County, Tennessee."
We are here, Your Honor, to decide on the validity of this will.
We will decide all 3 concerns during the course of this trial. We will, however, begin with the will. Are you able to produce this will?
Lloyd Ford Jr. was visibly shaken when the will was brought in by my husband.
Mr. Hale, do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I will.
Mr. Hale, do you recognize this document?
Of course I do. This is the will that was drawn up at my home by Mr. Lloyd Ford Sr. Those are our signatures. We wrote out everything he dictated to us. This would have been in 1840. I remember it as plain as it was today.
I wrote it word for word. He asked me if I questioned his sanity, and I told him, I don't question your sanity, maybe just your judgment, if you could help me understand.
I want Peggy and Edward and Rhoda and the whole family. I want them to have their freedom when I'm gone. And I want to know they're gonna be all right. They've been taking care of me. I want to take care of them.
A lot of people free their slaves, but what you're talking about, making them your heirs, Lloyd, them instead of your children?
They are my children.
Yes, yes, they've grown up with you on the farm.
No, they are my children. Peg, Rhoda, Edward, Lark, John. They're my children, Robert. You can deny it. My other children can deny it, but I won't deny them.
But what about your other children?
What about them? Do you see them? Are they here? Have they been here these last 20 years? Have they cared for the estate? Have they done anything to deserve any of this? I've asked them each to come back, to visit, to help. They don't even respond. No, Robert, my real children are at home with me on the plantation. I want to make it so they can remain on that land after I'm gone.
Is this vengeance against your boys, Lloyd?
No. My other sons get some, Robert. Some. Not all. They get what I believe they deserve. This last bout of sickness, I didn't think I'd make it. I sent for help. No one from my real family came. My other family did. Peg came with a cool cloth for my head and a tea made of some roots, things that she gathered up. Terrible smelling stuff. She begged me to drink it. I didn't want to, until she held my face in her hands and pleaded with me that it would draw the fever out, she promised. And when I looked into her eyes, I was looking into my own eyes. I never noticed how much of me there was in her. Then Edward came to sing some kind of prayer song. There I was again. Before this, I never thought, or I guess wanted to think, I brought to life 2 sets of children. Those who would spend their lives free to do as they please, and children who would spend their lives imprisoned, whose children would spend their lives in prison, and so on. Is that my legacy? There's an equal amount of me in each one of them. One is a legacy of ability and choice. One is a legacy of servitude. How is that fair? They're all part of me. Would any part of me want to be imprisoned forever? Sarah, please get the paper. I'm ready. In the name of God, amen. I, Lloyd Ford Sr. of the state of Tennessee, Washington County, being of sound mind and good health and memory, I want all of my estate to be sold and the amount arising therefrom to be equally divided by my 7 sons, James, Grantis, Alexander, William, Enoch, Thomas, and Benjamin. I want my land and Negroes to be disposed of in the following manner. I want my son Lloyd to have 1 acre to live upon during his natural life.
1? Only 1?
Has he done anything to deserve more, except to be born of my blood? 1 acre to live upon during his natural life. And I want my slaves to have their freedom and to have the land to live on and raise their families on if they see fit to stay on the plantation. Do you have all that, Sarah?
Yes, I do.
Lloyd, I'm starting to understand now, but just one more question, if you'll let me. Why not free them now?
I need them. I am still one man, not an army. I can only do a small thing. And this is all I have the courage and strength to do. But I will need your help to make it happen, because I know there will likely be a fight. Please tell me you will guard and honor this will when the time comes.
With our lives, Lloyd.
In court, the lawyers claimed the will was a fake and that the real one burned, that they had sworn testimony from Lloyd Ford Jr., which states that the actual will was thrown into a fire at the request of Mr. Ford Sr. My husband told them it wasn't at the request of Mr. Ford Sr., but at the gunpoint of Ford Jr. That's what my husband told them.
No, sir, I admit that on one night in October 2 years ago, your client came home to my home intoxicated with a rifle and demanded the will or he would shoot one of us.
But you admit the will was thrown into the fire?
I admit that an old school essay was thrown into the fire.
What?
You saw papers burn, but you don't know what was on them because you can't read. And you over there, his lawyer, you must know this. What you have here is the real thing. Sarah hid the will on the night your client came to her home with his threats.
The courthouse was overheating in the afternoon sun. Lloyd was sweating. We were sweating. And not just from the heat. Everything was on the line for us. Lloyd, he had a lot on the line too. But what he had on the line came down to dollars in his pocket.
We were here for something bigger, and I don't know if we knew it when we started. This wasn't just about an inheritance, or maybe it was, but a different kind of inheritance. What we were hearing about from the newspapers covering the case made us think in terms we hadn't thought of before. Hope. And that made us sweat even more, because we weren't just here for ourselves now. Our hope was everyone's hope. If we won, it would be no small thing. Then the lawyer said something no one expected. I would like to call to the stand the son of Lloyd Ford Sr.
I will not. I was not given notice of this.
And the lawyer said, not that son. I would like the son of Lloyd Ford Sr., known as Edward Ford, to please come to the stand.
Objection.
What exactly is your objection?
The prosecutor shall refrain from referring to any freed slaves in this room as family members of Mr. Ford.
It has already been established in writing and with witnesses that Edward, Peg, Lark, John, and Rhoda, who are freed slaves, are the children of Lloyd Ford Sr. Objection overruled.
They ain't his proper children. They certainly ain't my kin, and they ain't got no right to go up on that stand as if they was some high and mighty person. Their testimony don't even count. They got no more to say in this court than any of my father's other property. What are you gonna do next? Call up the dining room table? One of the horses? Their property, not people, my property.
Order. The defense shall restrain his client or he will be charged with contempt.
And there it was. Finally. What he said out loud is what other people were wondering in silence. The questions and evidence went on for days. The whole time, I felt Lloyd's eyes burning into me, figuring, wanting to count me out. But before he could do that, he needed to understand how to count me at all. It used to be easy to count me. I was 3/5. When the census rolled around, each slave was counted as 3/5 of a person. Me, my family before me. From the time we were taken from our own country and brought to the shores of this one, 3/5. I look at myself and I wonder about that, because I don't see nothing missing. I think that unnerves you the most, Mr. Lloyd Ford Jr. And I think it's what unnerved your daddy. You don't know how to count me anymore. And maybe he didn't either. If I was his flesh and blood, then what happens to those numbers? Does something change? 1 whole multiplied by 3/5 equals what? Do you get a new number? Do any of the numbers make sense? That's what this case comes down to. Mr. Ford, doesn't it? This is a lot bigger than money. If I'm free, if I'm not a slave, which the law states is 3/5, then what am I? We are not property, but people. We, the people. And if we, the free people, are counted the same as you, the free people, then maybe it makes it harder to look at other people and count them any differently. People who contain the same humanity as me, as you, that's what unnerves you, isn't it, Mr. Ford? If I'm not 3/5, then what am I? What's everybody in this audience? I can tell you, and God can tell you, no matter what you write down in your census book.
Amen.
Lawyers representing Lloyd Jr. tried to establish that their father was insane, that the Hells were untrustworthy, that the will was a forgery. One after another, the claims was proven false. Lawyers for each side made their final statements. It was now in the hands of the Washington County jury. You, the people, how did you vote?
At no other time in history has a case like this come before a court in the state of Tennessee or in all the United States. The good people of Washington County swore to deliver a verdict based on the facts provided. Do you have an answer, Mr. Foreman?
The members of the Washington County jury in the case of Ford versus Ford find that the will is valid and further uphold all rights and grants provided in the will.
This became a landmark case for the cause of slaves and freed slaves, not just in Washington County and not just in the state of Tennessee, but would be the first major case in the United States that would look at the plight of slaves and their rights as people. 20 years before the Civil War, this case would become a turning point. The decision of one man and his will, the decision of one family to stand up for themselves, the decision of one woman to bring a case on their behalf, the decision of 12 men in Washington County, the decision of more than 6 different judges through several appeals. Each decision was made by one person. And person by person, year by year, we strive to continue to become we the people, together and equal. We will get there together one day.
We will get there together one day. What a hopeful, powerful, prophetic promise that is. Here in 2021, we have made progress and we are not there yet. And it's going to take all of us to get there. These words are echoed in our musical offering, Wo Ya Ya. This song can be found in our teal hymnal, and it has its origins in Africa. The song was frequently heard in work camps throughout Central West Africa in the 1970s and 1980s. Hear the promise of this song. Hear the acknowledgement of the struggle, and hear the wisdom that the only way that we will get there is together.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know.
Here's the rest of the story. Peg, Rhoda, Edward, Larkin, and John won their freedom and their land, going through numerous appeals in front of at least 6 different judges. But they won. Their unique position as landowners allowed at least one of them to go to college. In the course of my conversations with our local historians, I heard that one of them even made it to Harvard Law School and then came back to be involved in politics in Jonesboro, but I do not have the sources that confirm that. So take it as you will. I also learned and was able to confirm that Peg, Rhoda, Edward, Larkin, and John were not able to keep the land forever. In 1872, a large portion of the property was auctioned off for tax money. I can only imagine the hardships and heartache that led to that action. Probably a variety of local, institutional, and natural challenges kept them from turning the profit they needed to keep the farm. And I think it's likely that in the 1870s in East Tennessee, racism may have cut these folks off from the community support they needed to make a running farm successful, in addition to the multitude of other factors that always makes farming difficult and risky. So we see, the story is not a fairy tale, and it doesn't have a fairy tale ending. Injustices continue, which is something we all know already because we see it all the time. And that fact is a powerful reminder that all of us Unitarian Universalists who are committed to building a world community with peace, justice, and liberty for all, our 6th principle. It's a reminder that a Supreme Court victory never means we've finished our work for justice, only taken a step in the right direction. Like how the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that gay people could marry, but that hasn't stopped people from firing gay employees or obstructing adoptions attempted by gay couples. The long march towards justice is a generational one, and we must all do our part. Our local heroes of Peg, Rhoda, Edward, Larkin, and John will show us the way. And so will modern figures like civil rights activist Fannie Lou Hamer, who reminds us that nobody's free until everybody's free. Our liberation is bound up in the liberation of the Ford family and all who have come after them. The work toward liberation, toward building the beloved community, or creating heaven here on earth isn't something that we ever get to stop doing. The lack of a fairy tale ending doesn't erase what Peg, Rhoda, Larkin, Edward, and John did with great courage, strength, and hope, just like every time we try something and it doesn't get perfect results, doesn't erase our call and our response to do this world transforming work. The history of this church, the history of the land surrounding this place, it's a place of enslavement and liberation. Next time you're at the building, take the walking trail to the bench in the back corner and gaze at the hills and fields over the barbed wire fence and imagine the love and the labor that went into that land. Imagine the blood, sweat, and tears that fought for home and freedom. Remember the Black people who fought for their freedom, the white people they fought against, the white people who helped, every white juror who voted for justice and liberation, and the multitudes who stood by and did nothing. Who does the history of this place call us to be? And so, Black and white, we do the work. We lift up our values that point to our interconnectivity and the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We struggle with determination for our liberation when we are the ones oppressed, and when we're not, we listen to those who are oppressed and let them tell us how to best aid their work. And we follow the call of our collective liberation, always holding to John Ford's promise. Person by person, year by year, we strive to become we the people together and equal. We will get there together one day. May it be so. Amen. And so mote it be.
With gratitude for the testimony of Peg, Rhoda, Edward, Larkin, and John, let's extinguish the chalice together. This is the message of our faith, to act with passion in the face of injustice, to love with courage in the midst of life's pain. This is the meaning of our chalice flame. May it empower our hearts until we are together again. Thank you for being with us today. We hope you'll join us next week to hear local educator and community organizer Michelle Treese share her reflections titled Lessons from the Pandemic, Empty Shelves and Beyond. If you have kids, go on over to the HVUUC Families Facebook page and see what's going on. Youth group classes have begun, and later this month, we will be doing an in-person, outdoor, and distanced holiday ornament craft. The Families Facebook page or our church's website has more information about the event and how to register. Please keep in mind that Reverend Tiffany will be out on study leave next week. She will occasionally check emails and her phone, but she will be slow to reply. And please get your COVID vaccine if you can to help us all stay safer. Our fundraiser auction is coming up very soon. It is a significant way that we financially and emotionally support our congregation every year. The auction will be held through an online platform from this Thursday, November 11th, through Saturday, November 13th. So it's coming. Right now, we are looking for donations, last-minute donations, and Deb Helmer is here to tell us more about it. Deb?
Hi. I have participated in the auction many times, and I found a wide variety of events and objects that I wanted to bid on, like a traditional Indian meal, and an astronomy lesson, Christmas ornaments, dog sitting, and a great vacation opportunity. I've been able to get to know many people, and the events have been relaxed, a relaxed way to get to spend time with them in a way I wouldn't otherwise have been able to do. My memories of the auction are fun, but just as importantly, this is a critical part of our finances. As treasurer, I've come to appreciate the contribution this event makes to the financial stability of this church. And really, it's only second to the amount that we raised through pledges. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Deb. I know that I didn't get my donations typed in until this week. And so there's time for all of us to still submit our donations. And I really love buying the items and having an excuse to socialize with people with so many of the events. And now it's time for our benediction. The spirit of love and liberation that some of us call God, some of us call the human spirit, and some of us prefer to leave as an unnamed mystery, has spoken words of hope to us through the writers of our musical offering today. And so I want to imaginatively speak these words back to you one more time. And as I do so, I imagine myself with each of you holding your hands. And I imagine myself with Peg, Rhoda, Larkin, Edward, and John holding their hands. And I imagine all of us in a big circle, holding hands while we stand upon the wind-swept farmlands of Gray, Tennessee, surrounded by oaks and deer, wild turkey, and cows, uttering this heartfelt prayer together. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will.
Praise to all that's holy for our diversity and openness to finding our commonality. The golden rule is practiced in every faith. The words may be different, but the spirit is the same. What shall we sing when we all sing together? How will we sound the rhythm of all creation? Listen, you will hear it within your heart. Grow the circle wider through outstretched loving hands. Grow the ties ever stronger as justice is our stand. Our faces are different and yet the same. We will find our place together when harmony we gain. What shall we sing when we all sing together? How will we sound the rhythm of all creation? Listen, you will hear it within your heart. We strive to understand, be always welcoming. Come join us in the journey. If you are wandering, your heart may find the path you've been searching for. We are standing beside you, and no one's keeping score. What shall we sing when we all sing together? How will we sound the rhythm of all creation? Listen, you will hear it. Praise to all that's holy for our diversity and openness to finding our commonality. The golden rule is practiced in every faith. The words may be different, but the spirit is the same. What shall we sing